Welcome to Integrated Insights with ICCG. For more than 30 years, our team has partnered with small business owners to prepare for and navigate the business transaction process. Pull up a chair as we share stories and insights from our experience on all sides of the M&A table. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Michael Hefner. I'm a team member at ICCG and your host for today's episode. I am joined by one of the co-founders of ICCG, Grant McQuilkin. Hey, Grant.
Howdy, howdy.
For today's episode, I'd also like to welcome back Craig Jansen. Hey, Craig.
Hi, great to be here.
So on a previous episode, we talked with Craig about Adibri and how he and his partners came to the decision to sell. On this episode, we will talk about his acquisition and post-acquisition experience. So Craig, just to get started, do you remember, well, Craig and Grant, do you guys remember the moment that you looked at each other and just said, hey, this is it?
I think there were a couple of steps along the way. And why I mentioned that is I had a this is it, then I backed away, and then I came again. And I'll identify a couple of those as Grant will remember. I was on the call. I've been, I don't know how many calls over the years I've received from people who are interested that didn't go further than a phone call. More than a dozen. And you very quickly get a sense on that call how this is going to go. It doesn't take long. And when I spoke to Darren Anderson, I don't think we were in it less than 5 minutes. And I'm going, okay, this is different. This is connecting with things that are really important to me. So, I was probably sold in the first, 15 minutes. And the reason for that, incidentally, is he never once talked about the company. He told me who he was, and he wanted to know who I was and who our team was. The business was almost secondary. And because we're in a services industry, this belief that the people are absolutely central and their story is important really resonated. So I went away and I spoke to Angie and Vance about that, and we set up a time for Vance to meet with Darren, and he came back and go, yeah, this looks pretty good. So very quickly got to rubber meets the road. He flew out with the team, and we had I read a couple of our non-owners into the next two of them and had them meet with him as well. And it was it was a good meeting. They brought in people from the existing prior people that they had acquired to tell their story and allow us to ask any question we had. So again, leaving that felt really good. Then we get to the deal, and the first pass on the deal wasn't great. I was disappointed. I was all jazzed and excited. So got the first pass on the deal, and Grant needed to talk me down off the tree. Which was that, hey, this is just the first step in this negotiation. It's not going to happen once. So that was very valuable to me. And then we went through about what was it that was important to us. And this is where Grant was able to act as an intermediary and go to Salas O'Brien and the person, Grant Rendell, who was navigating a lot of the deal, and say to him, look, this is what's important to Craig and the team. Let's twist this. In our case, what was really important to us was the ability to do a deal with as much stock in Salas O'Brien as we could get. And part of that was we really believed in it, in what Salas O'Brien was, and part of it was we knew that stock was escalating rapidly. And so the cash wasn't the deal for us as much. So once we got through that, we said, okay, we've got a plan here, but I'll probably expose a bit more than I should about Salas O'Brien. But we were accidentally, I guess, sent up because I asked for an employee handbook, because handbooks do a wonderful job of telling you who a company is, and because you get what they say they are, and then what they're enforcing. And I got a handbook that everyone has acknowledged was a very old handbook. And it said, amongst other things, your smoking break is at 9 o'clock in the morning for 10 minutes. And my head exploded. And I said to Grant, we're out. And so
Not because you smoke.
I was just going, no, we're not going to do this. And he reached out, and we set up a call with Darren. And Darren was going, what did you read, and where did that come from? And no, that's not who we are. And it was then. It was like, okay, we've got this alignment between what is stated as the values and the character of the company, and the practice of the company is aligned. And at that point, we said, we're good to go.
That's awesome. Grant, give your side of that story. How'd that go when he came to you?
Well, I think what Craig identified as almost like a seesaw. I mean, you're all in, and then you go, wait a second, is this really not going to happen? Because this is a big deal. And then until you talk about it, and you go back and you think about it, and then you go back and you talk about it again, and then you reconcile it. Either it becomes less important to you, or you get them to capitulate on a particular point. But every negotiation has we joke sometimes. We say every deal's got to die, before it lives again, kind of thing. But I think it's a very real thing. It's emotional, because you're dealing with something that is very dear to you, not just your people, but this is what you've built over time. And so it's not just fighting for every dollar you can get. It is this going to happen? And you get sold inside on that idea that, this is going to happen. And then all of a sudden something comes up and you go, oh no, this is not going to happen. And it's a yo-yo sometimes, and it toys with you. And just sitting down with a trusted person who can say, hey, is that a 10 or is that a 3? If from an importance standpoint. How important is this to you? Is this, some people use the word, is this a deal breaker, or is this something that we just need to figure out a way to mitigate, what you wanted to accomplish? So I think Craig is, as you can tell, he's a great communicator, and that really helped because we could go back to them and clearly articulate what was important to Craig, and not with hey, either this or we're out, but saying, hey, this is really important. Your offer doesn't necessarily deal with us in that particular way. How can we do better? Or how can we change things? And the other thing is I think Craig and I sat down and tried to anticipate what they were going to say. And then you're kind of already knew what was coming in some aspects. Every business has a sort of a revenue model where ahead of time what the questions are going to be and how they're going to prioritize things. And, as wonderful as Darren Anderson is as the CEO of Salas O'Brien, he had some really good people around him. Grant Randell, the guy that Craig was talking about, he's a really sharp guy and was able to understand the point of view that Craig was coming from, and was super reasonable. If you've got two people that are just treating it as every dollar I win is a dollar you lose, and that's all they care about, then again, it might not be a good match, because you're trying to form a partnership, not just buy something. It's not always the case, but even if the seller is not staying with the company, there's still the idea that your company or your business is going to partner with the other business, and so let's make it a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah, I would say that I was taken aback at the degree of the emotional roller coaster. And, you build a business over many years because you're deeply committed to it. You sacrifice sometimes things beyond what you probably should have sacrificed, but you do. And so you get emotionally intertwined with that. But one of the great benefits of business ownership is you steer the ship. I want to go left, I want to go right. And you make those decisions. Now, suddenly you come into these settings, and each suitor that you're looking at has got a different path they're going to go. And so all of a sudden, it's a binary. If I select this group, we're going there. If I select this group, we're going there. There's no dialogue. And so once you sell yourself emotionally into you're going off in this direction, and the deal stops, it takes some energy to regroup and be ready. So I think Grant was as much a counselor as he was a business deal facilitator. Just going, this is normal. This is how it goes. It's okay, and let's work together. I think both parties need to want to make a deal, and you need to have a conviction that that's the case. And once you have that conviction, then you can navigate the waters to making the deal happen.
So you've already mentioned, just what you saw in Solace. There were obviously lots of things that made you go that route. But looking back at it, the transaction process, and obviously there was parts of it that you, to say that you didn't enjoy the fact that you got a big check at closing is disingenuous. But there's parts that obviously were good, and there were parts that frustrated you. What would you identify in those two extremes?
Well, I think in the lead up to the close, there is so much paperwork that is foreign and was foreign to me. Just the deals that needed to be done, the legal agreements that needed to be set up, the employment agreements, and there's a measure of you just feeling this is just not going to end. And I'm I tend to be a let's move quick guy. And there was nothing there that was moving quickly. It was just tough. And I remember, waiting up late to do the deal. And I think the deal was, we thought it was going to be consummated, and then it happened the next day. And so that was no fun. The immediately getting the DocuSign and saying, okay, this deal is done is a very strange experience. And we have very nice offices with really nice equipment and things. And I walked around that night and I'm pointing at everything saying, not mine, not mine, not mine. Because I needed to get over that threshold. This wasn't mine anymore. I'm a guardian of it, but it's not mine anymore. And I needed to move past that and be okay with that, of course. Which I was. We otherwise we wouldn't have done the deal. But it's not to be downplayed how hard it is to walk past all of the stuff you've sweated over to develop.
So, any part of that process that that you would say was obviously it was new, but that you enjoyed, or that what part would you say? Okay, that was surprisingly a good part of that whole process.
I think that bringing our core team on board to this was, I'm not sure it's an enjoyable process, but it was a extremely valuable process to sit down with people who were not shareholders but leaders in the team, and who had brought us as far as we had, to say to them, this is what's happening, and marshalling their buy-in to this idea, which we were able to do, and be patient with them Grant came and spent a couple of hours with the group. At one point said, ask any question. And so for me, it was very satisfying for them to come to the conclusion that this was a good deal, A, and B, that they were going to trust me to lead this as an exercise, because I wasn't gambling with the future, but I was certainly setting a different trajectory for the future careers, at least as it related to them staying with us. Which, by the way, everyone but one person stayed with us, and now we've got people that just buy in. I think Darren is such a strong leader. I think when he came and did I'd say that was an enjoyable process. Watching Darren win the group over, and by the end of by the end of that session, I mean, we were probably 20 minutes in, and I thought they're going, "Who's Craig? Craig who?" You know? So that was very satisfying, and of course, post acquisition, it's been enormously satisfying to people's opportunities expand. We're in a setting where Salos O'Brien has over 80 offices, and things that I didn't expect is that all of those offices wanted us to succeed. So when I call them, I've got decades of knocking on the door from someone to ask them something and coming a little bit hat in hand. And now I knock on the door and they say, "Come on in. How can we help you? What can we do who can we connect you with? What resources can we provide you?" Because all of a sudden we're part of a larger team. That's been a huge jump for us.
Yeah, I love the fact that you trusted me to go have a cup of coffee with one of the employees that was having a hard time with the transition, right? And just sitting down and validating or making sure that he understood what you were saying was actually legit. It just that was such a fun part of getting your team on board. So good.
Yeah, well, we're a AV acoustics kind of group, so production is our thing. So on the day that we did the announcement, we did everything up to indoor flying, skydiving. So we made it a fun thing, and people came out of that really energized, not because of this indoor skydiving, but just together we're going to do something great. And I was asked at one point in the first interview where we did we brought in two teammates to interview with Darren. He flew in and brought some people, and he asked me, he said, "So what do you want to do?" And I thought about it. I said, "I want to change the world with the work that we do." And that was one of those moments. I wanted to see I wasn't testing him because it was a genuine response, but I also wanted to know, is that what he wants to do? And the answer is yes. And so those are the kinds of things you show, these core value alignments. I had no interest in being retired in place, just working out my earn out so I could leave.
Yeah, well, and that being said, though, we did put ways that if you weren't happy, that you could exit, right? I mean, we definitely took care of that. It's not like you bought in and just believed everything without putting things in writing that allowed you to run away if you weren't happy, right? And we priced it in a way that that allowed you to do that, and without having a ton of regret.
Yeah, no, I have no regrets on any form of how the transaction was written or handled. There's nothing I've gone back and said, I wish we would do it differently. I think I'd wish there's things I would have done differently, to be sure, but no major steps.
So one of the things that you did do, and you've mentioned it in a previous episode, is one of the things you wanted, if you were going to go all in with another company, is to be part of the equity. A lot of our clients now, because PE groups are now really fond of rolled equity, is what we call it, where you're taking some cash off the table, certainly sometimes vast majority of the proceeds, but then you're basically getting equity in the surviving entity or the parent entity. Help me understand. Obviously, I do know, because I'm your friend. It's gone really well from a performance standpoint, but how was that at the moment when you did roll that equity, and what was going through your head, and how did you over time, become satisfied with your decision?
Great question. And I think one of the things that, in fact, both of us, I remember it happening, we were both a little bit surprised at how quickly Salus O'Brien was willing to show us audited financials. And so we got the inside scoop. They also had a private company, so the valuations were based on a private independent firm that was doing valuations. So we got that report as well, and we were able to look at how they were valuing the group. Tie that to having seen the historical stock performance based on these annual valuations. I mean, it was meteoric, frankly, and even though I wasn't sure I believed that we were going to continue having that, it did. So no question, the best financial decision I've made in my life was getting as much stock as I could. But it was predictable in the sense that we looked at history, we understood, how the arbitrage works of coming in at one valuation and immediately in a larger group you're at a higher valuation. And I also knew, because I spoke to friends in the game to get their advice, what the market valuations were. And the market valuations were double. And so it went in very much with eyes open. And I'm sure there's settings where it's harder to know that. But in our case, it went in with eyes open. We knew what was likely to happen. And in fact, it did happen.
So along with going to be a part of a larger organization, you were working for somebody else for the first time in since you turned gray. Well, no, even before that. How, obviously you're you're a leader that can lead up and lead down and lead sideways. I'm really confident that that's part of it. But were there any moments where you swallowed hard and said, this is difficult, or this is different than what it was?
I think the first year there are so many unknowns, and you come from a basis of security, of understanding what we control and what we don't, and going into the operation just being unclear what that looks like. What are the unspoken rules that exist in every organization? Just this one is somewhat larger, and trying to decide where I fit in that pecking order. What's my relationship with others? And there's no way around that, I think. I think it just takes time. So I would say the first year is tricky. At least with Salus O'Brien, one of the unique characteristics that took me several months to buy into, honestly, well, actually not to buy into, but to acknowledge, was that it's a collection of highly entrepreneurial driven people who get up every morning because these are people who founded the company, and they got up and they said, if I don't go get something to eat, we're going to starve today. I better go do that. And I was concerned for me personally that would shift, because that's how I was wired. And I thought, well, is that going to change? And no, because now, as I said, in the first episode, it's playing with house money. So all of a sudden I was grabbing more. And that was true for all of the other teams that had been acquired. In that case, the vast majority, and that was a key factor in making the decision, the vast majority of the people who were acquired, all of the leadership stayed on across over 30 companies and were still employed. And other than some retirements, that's continued to be the case.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
And that was important to me. I could see some settings where in certain industries where that wouldn't be as important, but it was to me.
So Craig, previously we've recorded a couple episodes on working capital, and I know that your wife handled that a little bit more, just being the financial person with the debrief. But was that what you expected, and was the appropriate result achieved?
Yeah, if I had understood how these deals worked 15 years ago, I would have gone and acquired some companies. I just didn't understand how it worked. And when I'm sitting on the other side of it, I go, oh, well, that makes sense. And so everything that I thought was this great mystery Grant did a spectacular job of going, no, 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 this is not complicated. This is why it works like this. This is a standard approach. And that helped me start understanding how the working capital worked. So, no, I don't think there was any angst at any part of that. Once I understood the formula, once I understood that the receivables, the AR was something I needed to that's my money, so I better go get it. And things like that. Again, Grant made that very easy to understand.
That's great. Anything that you would add there, Grant, on the working capital piece?
Yeah, look, we deal with a lot of clients who don't have financial expertise in the ownership mix. And so, obviously Angie was huge in making sure that all of that was taken care of. But it always takes time to walk through with clients so that they understand the process. And, it's at the end of the day, you got to go into it somewhat with a trust in obviously us as the advisor, but also, that the forecast of how it's going to land is going to be achieved. And that's where, once we painted that picture of what it was going to look like, I think Craig was comfortable. And then just, obviously Angie needed to be comfortable with the forecast as well. But I think the decisions were, once he understood the process, he made decisions to make sure that the forecast was achieved.
Yeah, and it's the classic, the person selling wants and believes more in their value than the person buying. I wonder how often in your career, Grant, you've had someone come back and, man, we got one over that buyer. We just got more money than we were worth. I would suspect that's not ever happened, and it certainly wasn't for me. But we were able to very quick, once you make these decisions, you've got to move on. And looking back is not helpful emotionally and in any practical sense. At a certain point, you go, this is the market. This is what the market pays. And it doesn't matter how much I think my baby is pretty. If the market's saying your baby's okay, that's what it is. Move on.
Yeah, so not to be self-serving at all, because I think, our goal is to help business owners understand that they need advisors in the process. But what would you say was some of the values of having us involved in your transaction, in your experience from the first times you were given some sort of indication of interest till past the date of closing? What would you say the value of having somebody like us at the table is?
Well, what I should say is, we started talking about what ended up being a deal 4 years earlier, and the advice that you gave allowed me to rethink how we structured a team, how we, to some degree, compensated them, and how we started moving towards what this end game would look like, so that we were prepared by that. And so that counsel is irreplaceable. I suppose theoretically someone could have come along in the first year and made a great offer, and we would have just pulled the trigger, even without initially understanding how it all went. But that counsel was incredible. And we also started to learn what was important to buyers and reframing what we did. I give you, for example, we had spent a considerable amount of money developing some software that would have been very difficult. It improved our productivity, but very difficult to validate. Talking a couple $100,000. And so it took me a while to learn that no one cared that we had spent that money. What they cared about is, did that money allow us to be more profitable? And they weren't going to say, well, you've got $400,000 in software, let's do a EBITDA multiple of 5 on that. It's just not going. So those things were important, and then of course finally the process. Once with Grant at the table, there's a language that M&A people use, that you all speak the same language. And that was actually very satisfying to go, okay, my guy speaks that language, because goodness sakes, I'm not going to be able to learn it.
That was the funniest thing, because Darren, the CEO of the Solace, the guy that led the M&A department for them, his first name was Grant, and so Craig and Darren would say, I tell you what, let's my Grant talk to your Grant.
Incidentally, our Grant now is CFO. So he's, and we moved into a company that was growing rapidly. I mean, we're 2 years and 4 months, 5 months now, I guess, into, we're in May. When we joined, including us, the company size was 1,250. By the time this podcast goes out, we'll be at around 3,200.
Wow.
So for me, that's been exciting. We got on a ride of a train that's just going flat out. And, that fits my temperament very well. I like that. It re-energized me. Because when you're running a small business, a fair amount of that is maintenance. You're just keeping the wheels going. So the excitement is fun.
Yeah, and you had a pretty complex structure based on just history, and you had a lot of I guess different ways of structuring your business, and so that was not easy to get around, and so your accountant was amazing to help deal with that. I think it was a challenge, but we worked through it, and I think we came out with a really good result. Craig, one last question that I would love for you to answer, and if you've got guys that we're talking with, for example, that are in the process of considering selling their business, preparing their business for a sale, what advice would you give them, just on the, not that you're on the back end of everything in your career, because you're started a whole new thing, but what would you tell them?
I'd say the process, you mentioned our complexity of our structure, and that was honestly because I think we didn't get good advice earlier in the work that we were doing. And by early, I mean, when we first started the company, we started off on the wrong foot with respect to the way we framed the company up, and things just got more complex after that. And so that led, I would say to anyone, if your systems or your organization is complex in terms of structure, make it less complex, because it makes that so much easier to navigate the process. Secondly, I'd say, get your tax advisor on to have the conversations about what happens and how much tax, because it's pretty emotional when we all used to paying tax, but when it all comes in a big chunk, that's a whole different game. And what seemed as a percentage reasonable looks like a really high number. So get used to that well before the session, because your emotions will take a dive. You're going to go, I'm giving all of that money away? And taxes and death are coming for you. So get over it. And then I would say that the emotional part of it is you've got to want a brighter future. And you've got to believe in that. And so for me, I did. But I also had the parachute packed that would allow me to jump out if the plane was going to crash, and too many illusions there. But the fact that I knew I could get out in this new deal if we needed to, and we may take a beating on some of our own out, but it was doable. You got to plan for that. That's the reality. Yeah, and get through the first year, because the first year is everything's changed. We went from cash to accrual. We went to audited financials. We went to blending with another company that had been acquired, navigating in our division now with a much larger group, navigating two sets of books. There's a lot of heavy lifting. Suddenly we're dealing with HR of a much larger company, which, before I just make a decision, let's do it. And now you've got to validate that a bit more.
You can't go through the McDonald's drive-through and hire the guy behind the counter anymore, right?
Now, we were given tremendous freedom, which is really, really good. I have a great deal of freedom, so that has been spectacular. But I didn't know for sure that was going to happen.
Yeah, I think a lot of our clients are retiring, so they're not moving on. But I think what you said is super important. Don't run from something, run to something, right? So even if you are retiring, have a plan of what you're running to, even if it is the Bahamas.
I have a friend I've had several friends ask me for advice, having known we've gone through it, and a couple of them have left it too late. And I don't want to tell them that's going to make them feel good. But the answer is your value is increased when you continue at the helm in many cases. And so so one of the things I did was very cognitively, starting maybe even as 10 years ago, is to reduce my dominance in the company in terms of face to the clients, because I wanted to be very sure that the value wasn't me or just two or three of us, but was spread across a broader group, and that certainly made the company more valuable. But people are waiting until they're 65 to try to figure it out. That's pushing the envelope.
Well, hey, y'all, that's all the time that we have for today. I know it feels like we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg still. We'll have to have you back for another one, Craig. But
happy to do that.
Make sure that y'all see our show notes for more on Craig. And Grant, Craig, thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of Integrated Insights with ICCG. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories from our team. We love hearing from our listeners. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please send us an email in the show notes. For more information about ICCG, please check us out on our website or follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Until next time, there's always a seat at our table.